Mastering discipline is perhaps the most important thing you can do if you want to live well and perform at a high level. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to master it. The tragedy about discipline is that most people have no idea how to automate it and build systems around it. They rely on willpower alone and they end up disappointing themselves again and again. This leads to lower self-esteem and lower confidence, and it creates a vicious cycle of disempowerment. The good news is there is an answer, and by utilizing the power of the neuroscience of discipline and behavior change, and by implementing the systems that I'm going to reveal to you in this video, you can unlock effortless discipline and consistently make frictionless progress on all of your goals. Discipline is a meta skill. If I could have one superpower, it would be to have perfect discipline. It literally makes every other habit that you're going to try and instill, or every behavior that you need to complete to get to your goals, so much easier. Every single thing that you seek in your life is on the other end of usually some uncomfortable or difficult or scary actions that you need discipline in order to take so you can get the results you want. Feelings of fulfillment, progress, growth, positivity, love, contentment, these things are all on the other side of difficult things that discipline will get you to do. There's a great quote from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and Aang is talking to a master about how he can get better. And he says, I want to master all the disciplines. And the master says, before you master the disciplines, you first must master discipline. And it's always stuck with me, that quote, because it's so true. The value of anything that you want to achieve is relative to the difficulty of the obstacles that you need to overcome in order to get it. So if you want to experience high value things in your life, relationships, finances, health, then you need to overcome serious challenges and work hard in order to get there. And thankfully, discipline follows a simple equation. The likelihood of you taking action, i.e. your discipline, equals your willpower minus the difficulty of the task. So the more likely you are to complete an action, the more likely you're going to have discipline, and you're going to be doing the things you need to be doing. And therefore you need to have as high willpower as possible, and you need to make the tasks, or the perception of difficulty involved in the tasks, as low as possible. And you do this by focusing on two things, and that is dopamine optimization and building behavior change systems. And I'm going to get into both of these in this video, so let's jump into it. So let's start with how to hack your dopamine so that you can skyrocket your willpower and make everything seem easier, even if they're usually difficult tasks for you. So what is dopamine? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is involved in motivation and pursuit. And when you're feeling like you want something and you're motivated to action, that is dopamine driving you. If you optimize your dopamine levels, you can actually feel that drive and that motivation towards action, even in the most difficult or uncomfortable tasks. And that's where the unlock comes from, optimizing your dopamine levels. A high baseline level of dopamine will make all of the hard tasks that you need to do seem easy, and a low baseline level will make everything seem hard, even the most basic easy tasks. And a low baseline dopamine is the main cause for chronic procrastination. And I know this because I am a chronic procrastinator, and I was before I started figuring out and really obsessing about how to hack the mind for productivity, for discipline, and for consistency. Because for me and my clients, it's all well and good having an awesome program or having awesome advice that you can execute on, but if you're not going to actually do the work, everything is useless. In terms of having a skill, I'd way rather have perfect execution than the perfect plan, because the perfect plan with no execution will get you nowhere. But being able to execute perfectly really doesn't require that much research to find a pretty good plan that's going to achieve your goals. There's many ways to get what you want. So going after the discipline and the ability to act despite how you're feeling is going to get you where you want to be and get you results every single time. So how do we optimize our dopamine so that we can hack our neurochemistry to make it easy for us to do stuff? We need to do two things. We need to remove the things that bring our dopamine baseline down, and we need to start doing things that bring our dopamine baseline up. We're going to go into those right now. So let's start with removing what lowers our baseline of dopamine. So anything that causes small, sharp little dopamine spikes. So think anything to do with like entertainment, digital, media, social media, podcasts, audiobooks, anything that is engaging and stimulating information that is novel and interesting, just like social media, that you don't have to work for in order to gain that novelty. All of those things are going to lower your dopamine baseline, as well as things like eating sugar or junk food as well. In general, more broadly, anything that gives you a short-term pleasure, distraction, or numbing is going to spike your dopamine, and you're just going to have a crash in dopamine after that. And it's usually in that dopamine trough where you go for another dopamine spike by looking at social media even more or whatever it is. And that's when you can really start to crash your dopamine levels. And we've all experienced this when we've had hours of scrolling and just feel like, absolute crap afterwards. Another thing that spikes your dopamine is almost all forms of drugs. So like nicotine, especially caffeine as well. These two are like commonly abused by most people. There's nothing wrong with them, but most people in society abuse these drugs that will release huge amounts of dopamine. When you have them, they give you a massive crash afterwards. So being able to manage that and understand how they influence your neurochemistry gives you power over them so that you can use them and they're not using you. But in general, the less information that you can consume and the less value and stimulus that you have coming in, the more you're going to be able to put out in a creative manner. And that is ultimately what's going to determine how fast you get to your goals, because your ability to take action and your ability to execute on plans and to be creative, creating content, creating things at work that you have to do, whatever it is, you're going to need to be outputting more than you're inputting, and that's how you accelerate your progress in any goal. Continually consuming information is going to destroy your ability to have high output. So second, we need to start doing things that will gradually build and raise our level of dopamine over a longer period of time. There's also an incredible technique that I've discovered recently to give you a natural boost in dopamine right away at any time, in a not effortless, but incredibly simple and quick way. And I'll get to that straight after we get into these more long-term dopamine raises. So pretty much behaviors that raise our dopamine and keep it high on a more long-term scale is anything that improves our physical and mental health. So regular exercise with progressive overload, eating well, sleeping well, taking care of your stress levels and your mental health. These are all things that are going to help you keep your dopamine levels high and your motivation consistent. But the most important factor that I have found of all of these is definitely exercise. Exercise, I have found for myself and my clients that I work with, is the keystone habit. If you're exercising consistently, you're making progress, and you're putting in decent amount of effort to your training, you're going to be finding it so much easier to do every single other habit that you're planning on doing, like eating well, sleeping well, not going on your phone right before bed. These things are all so much easier when you're crushing it with your exercise. And you've probably noticed this yourself as well. And you will learn more about exactly why that is when I explain this short-term dopamine raising hack. So how do you remove all of the tech and the distractions and start doing all of these dopamine raising activities? It sounds like a bit of a task. Where would you start? So what I have found is doing a dopamine detox or locking into a monk mode is the best way to do this. So this is where you spend 2 to 8 or even 12 weeks locking in on these habits and being really strict with them. And the idea is that you actually know that it's going to end. That makes it so much easier to lock in, because if you know that it's going to end in the future, you can easily justify yourself all of what you're missing out on in the meantime. And then over time, with these short periods of lock-in, maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's 4 weeks at a time, you start to ratchet up your floor, your baseline level of operation, so that when you end your monk mode or your dopamine detox, the level of habits that you fall to will be significantly above where you started. And so you fall to here, you come up to here, you fall to there, you come up to here, and over time you ratchet up your baseline level of operations, which is the most powerful way to do this in short little bursts. So when I did a monk mode, it completely changed my life, my relationships, my business, my fitness, my health. And I've been doing them periodically ever since and just getting better and better. The basic kind of guidelines that you want to follow when you're on your first one, this is a good kind of list to go after. So you want to exercise for 30 minutes a day, ideally like an hour. Try to get that in like 5 days a week. Number 2 would be, in most monk mode protocols, there's meditation. meditating for 10 minutes a day is a great place to start. Do it in the morning. Meditation is actually a mini dopamine detox, like a very compressed one, because you effectively starve your brain of novelty and stimulation while you're sitting there with your eyes closed, trying to unhook your brain from all of the thought trains that it tries to run on to entertain itself and provide itself some dopamine stimulation. The process of meditation is decoupling yourself, strengthening the muscle that decouples yourself from those thought trains and comes back to the very present moment. So meditation is an absolute must for a effective monk mode. You want to eat healthy on your monk mode, so no sugars or junk food, ideally low GI carbs, higher protein meals that are going to keep you fuller for longer, and just cleaning up your diet in general will help a lot. You want to get to sleep at the same time every night and wake up at the same time every morning, and extra points if you do this on a weekend as well. If you keep that bedtime consistent, you're going to absolutely crush the monk mode. Big one is no social media, no TV, podcasts, audiobooks, any kind of digital information or input that is surplus to requirements that you don't actually need. If you have to lock in for something for work or read some piece of news, do so. But the more you can eliminate in terms of digital information input, the better. And no drugs. So no caffeine, alcohol, or any other recreational drug use is the best way to optimize your dopamine levels fast. And think about this, like discipline is a skill. You don't just go down and start shooting hoops for 2 weeks straight and expect to get better. You have an intentional period where you're focusing on something and you shoot 100 hoops and you go back the next day and you come back. So you have to have these like periods of focus so that you can actually like build the skill. And that's what this monk mode helps you do. So that's how to optimize your baseline level of dopamine and start ratcheting up your floor of operations, because you always fall to the level of your preparation and practice and systems. And that's how to increase that with the cyclical, repeated dopamine detoxes or monk modes. So now we're going to get into an incredibly useful tool that I have found recently and been practicing every single day that allows you to instantly raise your level of dopamine and motivation in 5 minutes or less, and make pretty much any task that you had resistance when you were thinking about doing it. If you had resistance, you can do this and you'll come back and the resistance will be gone and you'll be able to crush it. So this resistance to doing the things that we need to do can sometimes last hours, minutes, weeks, days, or even a lifetime for some of the things that are uncomfortable, but we know that we need to do. And if you can get better at minimizing procrastination and narrowing the window between I should do that and I am executing on that, then you can become so much more productive and you can make more progress in 1 year than you have in the 10 years prior to that if you just shorten that gap. And that's where really successful entrepreneurs or athletes or anyone that has built something incredible, that is the gap that they've been shortening to build their motivation and to execute on actions that have got them there. So in a nutshell, how do you overcome this resistance in the moment? By what I call productive procrastination. So the idea is that your level of discomfort, perceived discomfort in completing or starting the task is, say, this high. So what you want to do is productively procrastinate by choosing a separate task, completely unrelated, with a level of discomfort that is higher than what you feel the level of discomfort is in the task that you want to actually complete. So the best way to think about this is physical exercise or anything that's going to involve discomfort, fear, or small amounts of pain is going to be the best way to reduce the resistance to doing the thing that you actually need to do. And once you understand this principle, you literally unlock effortless discipline on command. There's 3 main types of things that you can do to give you this instant motivation and dopamine spike to make doing something hard easier. So the first thing is exercise. 20 reps of anything. Push-ups or squats, even better, 40 reps. If you do 20 reps, you're going to come back to that activity that you were previously resisting and you're going to crush it. And if you don't, do 40 reps, do 80 reps. Whatever's going to be sustainable for you, choose an exercise that's not going to completely roll your training for the week. But I find 20 push-ups and 20 squats maybe takes about a minute, and anything is almost doable after that amount of even slight discomfort involved in that. Another good one to do here is like isometric holds, because you really have to be in the suffering of it. Things like planks or even wall sits are really good for this too. Second thing is cold exposure. So you can do like an ice bath just for your hands in like a bowl ice bath with your hands. You can do that with your face, even better, or you can be fully submerged in an ice bath, or cold showers is another good way to do this. But here in Southeast Queensland, even in the middle of winter, a cold shower's not really gonna zest your system up that much. So if you're fortunate enough to live in somewhere with where you turn the tap on and it can be literally bitterly cold, then utilize that, and you'll see the influencers like Andrew Huberman and the biohackers go on about cold exposure and increasing dopamine levels. And this is the main reason that I've found people actually get ice baths. It's not because of the recovery benefit, but because of the increase in dopamine that it actually gives you. There's research to show this, and if you look up Andrew Huberman and ice baths, then it'll show you how there's 2 to 4 times increase in your dopamine levels for hours after cold exposure. So number 3, this is the most powerful way and the most simple and able to be done anywhere way that you can instantly increase your dopamine levels. And this is by CO2 tolerance training. So what this means is effectively slowing down your breath rate so that CO2 builds up in your blood. And that is what triggers the need or the feeling to want to breathe. Your exhales, your exhalation, and your breathing rate is what determines how much CO2 gets offloaded from your blood out of your system. And when the CO2 builds up, that's the thing that makes your breathing increase and makes you breathe more heavily. But if you intentionally slow down your breathing rate, then CO2 can build up, and it triggers a really deep sense of fear and distress in the body. And this is exactly what you need to create a response in dopamine in your mind. Tony Robbins talks about the pleasure pain principle. And if you go after a form of discomfort or pain that has a long-term gain associated to it, you will have pleasure on the other side. It's a natural neurochemical seesaw that will go the other way. And the opposite is true, and that's why we all feel crap after, binge scrolling on social media. But I've found that CO2 tolerance training gives such a good dopamine spike, and the easiest way that I've found to do it is by doing box breathing. You can download the app called iBreathe. You can set up a box breathing session on that for about 5 minutes. I like to do 11 seconds on the exhale hold, 8 seconds on each of the inhale and exhale, and on the inhale hold about 20 to 25 seconds. And that means that because your breathing rate is slowed, you will actually be exposed to high levels of CO2, it's completely safe, throughout that 5 minutes and a lot of discomfort. And that will give you a massive neurochemical bump on the other side of that discomforting experience. And CO2 tolerance training isn't just good for dopamine spikes, it's actually really good for your cardiovascular fitness. I've also noticed that this type of training has increased my pain threshold and allowed me to go harder in the gym as well. And it's also good for reducing your anxiety too. So all of those benefits we can talk about in another video, but just know that CO2 tolerance training, like I've explained, is the most effective, simple, quick way to cause a big jump in dopamine on the other end of it. So those are the 3 most powerful ways that you can cause a short-term surge in dopamine that'll last anywhere from half an hour to a few hours to make anything easier. When you experience that resistance, implement one of these 3 protocols, and I definitely suggest CO2 tolerance training as the most effective of those, and it will lower the resistance to whatever task you were previously dreading doing, and it'll really unlock effortless discipline for you. So get good at this and master this, and I've noticed that it has completely changed the game for me. I've been doing 25-minute Pomodoro blocks, so 25 minutes of work, 5 minutes rest, and in that 5 minutes I've been doing CO2 tolerance training. Now, productivity has skyrocketed, and I've literally been crushing through tasks that I would previously procrastinate on or get caught in like paralysis of analysis and would previously take me a long time to do. So bang, that is how to optimize your dopamine to make your willpower high and increase your willpower at any time, and to decrease the perception of difficulty in any task, both chronically over a longer period of time and in an instantaneous fashion. Now we're going to talk about how to build systems to make every task objectively easier. The best way to improve your discipline is to build systems and design your environment as if you had the worst willpower of anyone in the world, while simultaneously doing the things that we just talked about before for building your dopamine in order to maximize your willpower. If you rely on willpower alone, you're bound to fail, and this is what most people do, and they feel like they're failing because they just can't will themselves to do stuff, but they don't know how to hack their dopamine to make themselves more motivated to do stuff, and they don't build systems to make the difficulty of completing these tasks way easier. We need to lower the bar to jump over as much as possible with systems that we can implement into our life. This is the other half of the behavior change coaching in my program that I've been focusing on with myself and my clients for a long time now. And I'll explain 8 key principles that you can apply today to start making changes and designing your environment and your life and building systems to make it easy to do the stuff that you need to do. So first off is the 4 habit change principles that come out of James Clear's book, which is Atomic Habits. The 4 principles are: make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. So in terms of make it obvious, you have to think about the cue for the behavior. The behavior is the habit and the cue is what reminds you to do it. Imagine putting your shoes in your doorway so then when you go out for your morning wee in the morning, you run into them and you remember you have to go to the gym. This is a way in which you can design your environment to have the cue as obvious as possible so that the likelihood that you even remember to do the habit is as high as possible. Number 2 is to make it attractive. So you want to make the behavior, the habit, as attractive as possible. You can do this by pairing it with something else that you already really enjoy. So if you want to get good at reading, you could pair reading with drinking your morning coffee, and therefore you'll be combining something that you already enjoy with something that you're trying to start, and bang, it'll be attractive. 3 is making it easy. You could just write this on the top of the how to build your habits brainstorming list. Making it easy as a general concept is all what behavior change is about. So this is where friction design comes in. You want to remove as much friction as possible from all of the behaviors and habits that you want to start, and add as much friction as possible to all the behaviors that you want to stop. If you get your gym clothes ready the night before, it's going to be so much easier to get to the gym. And if you download an app blocking app like Opal that makes you wait looking at a boring screen for 30 seconds before you can unlock Instagram, it's going to make it way harder to get addicted to social media. Number 4, make it satisfying. Add some of your favorite gym exercises into your gym routine, or give yourself a reward at the end of completing the behavior or habit. Second thing that we're going to talk about is creating a clear and detailed plan. To do something hard, you want to remove all the decision associated with it. The more times you have to make a decision, the more times you're opening yourself up to procrastination and indecision and paralysis by analysis. The best way to combat this is by having a very clear and unambiguous plan, an exact recipe that describes all of the behaviors that you're going to try and do in detail and all of the things that you're going to not do. The clearer you can make this and the more detailed you can make this, the less your mind has to interpret whether what you're doing is in the plan or what you're doing isn't. Think about this like a hose. If you had all these big holes in a hose and you were trying to pump water through it, you're leaking all of this energy. All of these questions or uncertainties around what you're supposed to do are the holes in the hose, leaking all of your energy. If you have a clean, unbroken hose, you're going to be able to pump the maximum amount of water, the maximum amount of your energy towards something. And if you think about it, if you give yourself really clear guidelines and you give yourself a really clear goal at the end of the tunnel, you naturally facilitate forward momentum. If there is an undefined goal and the parameters for behavior are very undefined, it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, and you don't want that when you're trying to achieve a goal. This is what I do in my online coaching. I make everything as clear, simple, and easy as possible. We make all the decisions up front so that they can just focus on executing, and I can support them in doing that. And that's how they get good results. And if you want to learn more about that, just read the description. There'll be some links and some details in there for how to learn more about what I offer. The next thing that we're going to talk about is temporal anchoring. If you have parts of your day or already established habits that are consistent, you can attach habits before or after that or with that to establish new ones. So if you love drinking your morning coffee, but you haven't yet built the habit of meditation, meditate before your morning coffee so it is sandwiched in between something that you like doing. And then when you go for your morning coffee, you'll realize, oh, I better meditate. And Bob's your uncle, you'll be meditating in no time flat. The next thing is tracking, metrics, and gamification. This is probably the most underlooked aspect of behavior change and habit formation. And a lot of people that I talk to are kind of like, oh, Pat, like I can't be screwed to track my habits, and they don't take it seriously. But here's a perfect example of how gamification can make you addicted to doing hard things. I'm in my late 20s, and all of my friends and lots of people that you probably know too have just become addicted to like middle and long distance running. Everyone's doing a marathon now. It's not even a thing. And the reason is because of smartwatches and Strava. The smartwatch effortlessly and automatically tracks and quantifies all of your efforts. And Strava gamifies this by laying out all of that data in a really nice, easy to consume way. This gamification of running has literally made people addicted to running hard and made running marathons like the norm. So the question is, how can we use this principle of gamification and tracking to make doing all of our other habits easy? And this is where tracking comes in. You can either use a physical sheet of paper on your wall, and the pros of that are it literally reminds you every single day you run into it. You can track off your habits, you can see your progress, you can be motivated by that, but you can't really get the statistics behind it, which really motivates me. I also like to use Google Sheets, and then you can actually code up the spreadsheet so that you can see your average levels of adherence over the week, over the day, for each habit over the week, over the month. And that's what really helps me feel motivated and also gives proper amounts of objectivity. So objectivity is something that most people lack when it comes to habits. I have asked like hundreds of people what they think their adherence percentage is, how consistent are they with a particular habit? And most people say, oh, like 80, 90%. And then when you actually get into it, it's only about 20 to 40% for most people. And I don't think many people realize how hard it is to hit 80% adherence on a habit for more than 4 weeks in a row. But if you can do that, that objectivity gives you unequivocal, undeniable evidence that you have crushed it, which is so motivating. And if you haven't done it, then you know exactly what you have to do in order to get better with, again, no ambiguity. So if you aren't already, start tracking your habits. Next is accountability. It's way easier to let down yourself than it is someone else that you've made a social contract with and a commitment to. But there's two main ways that people fail to use accountability properly. So the first thing is when they have an accountability partner, most people don't clearly define what their goals are, even to themselves, or the accountability partner. So what are you supposed to be accountable for? And the second thing is they don't schedule regular check-ins. You might have experienced this yourself. You made a commitment to a friend. They said, great, I'll hold you to account. And then a month later, you have never talked about it. And you're like, oh, true, I've been doing that the whole time and failing at building that habit. You want to make the habit tangible and clearly defined for both of you, and you want to define a check-in schedule that is consistent every single week. Building off that is making things tangible. Writing things on a piece of paper and putting them to your wall is old technology, but it is effective. When things are just in your mind or they're just loose intentions, it's so much easier to fall back on a commitment that you've made. But if you write it down on a physical piece of paper and you sign your name to it and you put it on your wall and it stipulates exactly what you're trying to do and what you're not trying to do, and you're going to look at that every single day and tick it off, just that process alone, without any increase in willpower or any other one of these techniques or principles applied, will drastically increase your habit adherence. Research has shown time and time again that people that write down their goals and commitments are more likely to get there and complete them. And last, building off the accountability is stakes. This is something I learned about from Tim Ferriss, and there's a great app called Stick STICKK, that automates this whole process for you. But effectively, creating stakes is creating rewards or punishments for if you do or don't complete the habit. And one of the best ways I like to do this, and one of the ways I've done this with one of my clients incredibly effectively, he was really struggling to complete a particular habit, and I said, let's create stakes. He goes, okay. We just got him to transfer $50 to a charity every single time he failed at that habit. And this was about 4 weeks into the program. For the rest of the 2 months, he literally crushed that habit with absolutely not a single missed checked box in the habit tracker. An even more powerful way is to donate to anti-charities, so political parties that you don't align with or movements that you don't agree with. Donate to them. It could be your most hated, like, football team or whatever. Donate to them, and that will motivate you super hard. And combining stakes with accountability and an accountability partner is a pretty powerful way to get some stuff done. And last is starting small. A really good way to think about this is just start with one. So this could be 1 page, 1 minute. Start with the smallest version of that and make that your minimum. Because if you read 1 page at night, then you can tick off that habit and you're in momentum and you're consistent and you don't want to let your streak down. But most of the time, you're going to read more than 1 page, but it's okay if you don't. Optimize for consistency first, then add intensity and complexity after. Drop the ego and start smaller than you think, because you may be less disciplined than you think you are, and most of us are in that boat. So that's the deep dive on discipline. Use these tips on optimizing your dopamine and creating systems to make tasks easier, and you will unlock effortless discipline.